particularly down my team in the front row. Thanks, guys. So tonight I'd like to talk about the idea of a life that's lived off script. A life that's lived in response to this divine invitation to improvise with the whole of our lives, to engage in an act of co-creation with the Creator. And in order to do that, I want to start with 2 stories. And in order to start with those 2 stories, I'm going to need to get my clicker. Thank you. That's where we go. Okay. Story number 1. I'm in Morph prison, the maximum security prison in Cape Town, with a group of amazing men who are all preparing for their release back to the community. I'm spending 5 weeks with them, and together, through games, through drama, and through specifically improvisation, we're going to explore our emotions, how to identify them, how we experience them, how we share them with others without harm, and to build our empathy and our capacity for forgiveness of others and ourselves. It's week 2, and the topic is anger. So I asked this amazing bunch of men, can you give me an example of a time when anger leads to violence in prison? There are quite a few examples. One guy says to me, yeah, easy. So, a guy has just bought a packet of smoke, some cigarettes, and he leaves them on his bed in the cell, and he goes outside. Someone steals those cigarettes, he comes back, the cigarettes are gone, and there's a massive fight. I was like, great, we'll use that, perfect. Are there other people in the cell? Oh, yeah, the cell's overcrowded, there's always heaps of people. Okay, great. We're going to turn this into a play. So, we got a bit more of the script and the context sorted out, and then I took volunteers from the group to act out these different parts. It was quite an adventure. What I didn't realise is that though we were conducting our sessions in English for my benefit, most of the group were only capable of being angry in different parts, which is a language I have very little handle on. So what ensued was a lot of yelling and shouting in a language I didn't understand, a lot of picking up of chairs and threatening people with raised chairs, and luckily the warden did not come in and say, you're out of control. So we acted this scene out. It was hair-raising, we got to the end, and we're still friends, to my relief. So then I said, let's do it again. But this time, those of you who are watching, if you think anybody could change the way they use their body, the way they use their words, if they could do anything slightly differently, that's still realistic, that might change the outcome, can you say pause? And then we'll stop the scene, and you can come and be that character, and we'll see what happens. So we did this, and we did it again, and again, and again, and again, and it always ended in violence. And I kept saying, no, that I believe there is an option where it won't end in violence. My inner belief was getting weaker and weaker, but I was, really pushing the point. And then finally, one guy said, actually, I'd like to be one of the bystanders. He hopped in, and when the guy stole cigarettes, he just said, hey, those aren't yours, put them back. So the guy put them back. And then the owner of the cigarettes walked back in the cell. The cigarettes were where he left them, and there was no violence. And out of that came this incredible conversation that I had not anticipated about our shared responsibility for culture, about the fact that it's not just us controlling our own emotions, but us looking out for one another and our life together. Story number 2. I'm out the back of a real dingy dive bar in Nelson with a group of incredible actors, and we're playing word association. Why? Well, because we're about to go on stage, if you can call it a stage. For years, I have been, along with some fantastic friends and kids researching this story about this ex-mayor of Nelson, William Wallace Snodgrass. What a name! So, he was this local mayor and businessman, and one day in 1959 he was travelling from Wellington to Nelson on the Adelphi ferry, and he disappeared. And the case was never closed. We do not know what happened. So I had researched this story and I had written a play, rooted in the history of his life and the people his life intersected with. And this amazing cast of people were about to perform in this dodgy dive. But then, we were going to change things up a bit. After the interval, the detective characters were going to engage with the audience and ask them what they thought happened. What were their theories? The cast, meanwhile, were listening in with bated breath. Because the next thing that was going to happen was they were going to hop on stage, rooted in the characters that they had formed through rehearsal, rooted in the story, in the history, and inspired by the audience's frankly wild suggestions, they were going to improvise an ending. And boy, were they endings. We had Snodgrass falling off the ship following a prize hen or cock. We had explosives smuggled in moustache gel container by the mafia. There was all sorts. It was incredible, things I could never have scripted. So there we are, playing word association. Starting with one word, heading towards a completely unassociated word. Let's say, I don't know, getting from frog to origami. Together as a team. Just riffing off each other, knowing that we've got an end point we're headed to, and if we lean in and we trust the creative spirit in our midst, we'll get there. And therefore, we can nail the show. And we did. So, what am I talking about? Why? Well, believe it or not, I think that both of these stories have some parallels for the Christian life. You see, we are grounded in a story. Just like in the prison theatre story, we had these guys who are grounded in the story of what happens when anger turns into violence in prison. We scripted a scene, that's where we begin. And in the same way, our cast in the dodgy dive in Nelson is grounded in this historical story of this man and his life. And as Christians, that's where we begin too. We are grounded in this incredible story of this creator, this redeemer, this sustainer. We are grounded in the story of this God who exists in love, in a community of love, and out of that love, chooses to create. And says that God's creation is good, is very good. We're grounded in the story of a God who calls a people to be blessed, to be a blessing. Who calls his people towards justice and righteousness and care of the outsider. We're grounded in this story of a God who comes among us as one of us. We're grounded in this story where through the life and the death and resurrection of Jesus, we know that death and disease and oppression and shame do not have the final word. And we're grounded in the story of this gift of the Spirit that is given to us for our shared life together. But then, each of these stories also have in common the fact that they're headed towards a definite end. In the case of the prison theatre, I was just insisting, albeit not altogether confidently, that we could get to a place that didn't lead to violence. In the case of Snodgrass, we knew that whatever happened between us, eventually he was going to disappear. And as Christians, we also have this sure and certain hope. We are headed towards this kingdom of justice, of righteousness, of healing, where the lion lies down with the lamb, where oppression is dismantled. and where God is in our midst. So we too have this end point, which is determined, which is sure. And then there's the middle. And this, in the case of the prison theatre, in the case of Snodgrass, and I contend in the case of the Christian life, is the space for improvisation. This is where we are set free. To just play, basically. To create, to experiment. But the thing is, I think as Christians we're not that good at it. We get a bit panicked, you know? We're like, I know the Bible, it's an instruction manual. It's not an instruction manual. It doesn't tell us how to spend our hours and weeks and months and what job to get or what should marry or. It doesn't cover any of that. I don't know if there's like a missing book. That's not what it's for. So instead, terrified by the fact it's not in there, I feel like so often we just reach out for the scripts that society has available to fill that void where we could be improvising. So here's just a few examples that I've thought of these scripts. Let's imagine there's like a table in front of me, and there are all these scripts laid out. So that financial security, I've got to pick that one out. Everyone says that's really important. I've got to get the pension sorted, I've got to own a home, you know. That's just sensible. And it's important because I'm looking after myself and then other people don't have to. So that's a script we can pick up. And then there are these scripts around the way that we value our lives. Oh, well, obviously, important people look like they're busy, and they say they're busy all the time. They're tired and busy. So if I want to be a valuable person, and if you're tired and busy, so I'll pick up that script. And then obviously, you're not a complete person unless you're partnered up with somebody else, right? That's a clear script. I'll pick that one up. So, better get married, and then, well, obviously I have to have kids, I've got to have a nuclear family. So now I've got financial security, and I need a career. One of them's really important. That's on the table. I'll pick that up. Okay. So ideally, I need a career with a ladder. I've heard those are important. I don't think about what all the ladders gets, but it's got to have one that I can climb, right? Okay, good. So I've got one of them, and that also makes me sound important, so that's something. Because I don't feel very important, so I better get one of them. And hear me, I'm not saying that any of these scripts is intrinsically wrong. I am playing with them, but the thing that I really want to emphasize is that they're optional. We can pick them up. We can pick one up and not the others. We can pick a few up and scramble them together. We can pick one up, highlight some great lines we really like, and cut the rest. These things are available to us, but they're just options. And I won't go into this, but this also applies to the way we do life as church. We just tend to reach for scripts that are out there too. So let's take management scripts. Let's take scripts from the world of business, that'll do. Well, we can, but we don't have to. So, if we recognise the scripts as optional, where does that leave us? How do we begin improvising? I think for me, I find it really helpful to start from some questions. I find it helpful to ask myself things like, what really makes me feel alive when I'm doing it? And these don't have to be things that you can earn money for. I just mean, what sort of things bring you to life? What sort of gifts and skills and talents do I have? What are the needs around me? Who are the people I've been given to do this act of improvisation and co-creation with? What kind of character is God building in me? And I think when we start from those questions, we can start to get that creative energy of improvisation going. So, what does this look like for me? Well, as I have sort of looked at my life and looked at the things that bring me to life and noticed the area where I flourish, I've realised that I'm called to friendship. That's not something the church really talks about, and it's not something that society really celebrates either. But I realise that that's the thing that I'm for, and it doesn't matter if that's not a thing. It doesn't matter if that's not a title. And so then, well, what does that mean? Well, for me, I figured out that the way I can be, the best friend that I can be, involves a life of singleness, where I can be responsive to shape my lives around the needs, the celebrations of the people that I love. But I really love kids, and I really love teenagers. But that's okay, because I am grounded in this story in which God brings together this diverse bunch of people and says, you are family. And I take that really literally. I don't need to replicate my DNA. I get to share my life with amazing kids and young people. I get to participate in encouraging and learning from them. I get to participate in nurturing and raising young people. They don't have to be my DNA. And it's also, this improvising thing has led me on a really rocky and interesting journey over the past few years. I came back to Nelson a year and a half ago, really wanting to lean in to improvising with an empty slate with regard to jobs and work. And I've done all sorts of things. Some that have been exciting and some that really haven't. But I'm so thankful for the journey, and now I find myself in this place that I'm overwhelmed by. I'm training as a restorative justice facilitator, and I get to sit with people whose lives have been ripped apart by crime as they come back together and seek reconciliation and healing. And I also get to work in schools with kids, using drama to build emotional literacy and to help kids connect with one another as friends. And I still get to hang out with young people, in work and with my church. So I'm not suggesting that my life should be a pattern for yours. I'm not suggesting that my improvisation should become your script. I'm just simply offering an example of what it looks like to falteringly attempt to be grounded in a story that is so much bigger than us, and to be grounded in the knowledge that God's provision, that God's goodness is so abundant, we don't need to fear this scarcity or this not enoughness. To be totally focused on the awesome kingdom that is coming, and then to just relax and enjoy and improvise.